Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Tapino. I'm the chair of the psychology department here at Villanova. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us to help us celebrate the 50th anniversary of our being an academic department. Since the psychology department was established in 1959 to 1960, it's grown tremendously. It probably isn't all that surprising. When we started off, we had a faculty of 7, only 3 of whom had a doctoral level degree. Today, we've got 18 full-time faculty members, all of whom have their PhDs. Very early on in the history of the department, it became the norm that psychology faculty were going to be active, productive researchers, and our faculty has excelled in that regard. In terms of research productivity, we rank far above the average for non-PhD granting departments. In terms of citations per article, which can be taken as a measure of the scientific impact of the research, our department rivals many doctoral granting institutions. Now, when it comes to students, our records don't really indicate how many students we had in the beginning. For one thing, it turns out that although we had a psychology department as of the 1959-1960 academic year, Villanova didn't record degrees as being a psychology major or a biology major, etc., until 1970. So we can't go back during that first 10 or so years and find out exactly how many students we graduated. But since we've been recording, we've graduated more than 2,700 undergraduates with degrees in psychology, and the master's program was founded in 1961, and since then we've graduated more than 500 students with a Master of Science degree in psychology. Perhaps the greatest tribute to our department is that many of our alumni and alumni have gone on to enjoy a high level of success in professional psychology, academic psychology, and in a whole host of professions and careers that really aren't psychology at all. For our 50th anniversary, what we wanted to do was to celebrate the achievement of our former students. So the program we've planned features research talks, for example, by graduates of the department who are currently working in academic and industrial settings. The talks will represent a range of sub-areas in psychology, including neuroscience, developmental psychology, clinical psychology, personality, and human factors psychology. In addition, we'll have a panel discussion later on this afternoon on non-academic careers with a psychology degree. The panelists will again all be graduates of our department who have forged successful careers both in and out of psychology, but not academic careers. The discussion, this panel discussion, is intended to emphasize that psychology is more than just an academic discipline. It is a discipline that prepares students for success in a wide variety of careers. So once again, let me thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the afternoon. I hope you'll come back tomorrow. And we're working very hard behind the scenes to try to improve the weather for tomorrow. So with that, we come to our first speaker of the event, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Barbara Fease of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Fease graduated from Villanova University with her Master of Science degree in 1981. Prior to that, she had earned her bachelor's degree from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. And after leaving Villanova, she earned her PhD in clinical and developmental psychology at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Dr. Feist's first academic job was at Syracuse University, which is a very nice place except for its basketball team. While she was there, she achieved the rank of full professor and served as the department chair for the psychology department from 2001 through 2008. After that, she left Syracuse to accept the position as the Pampered Chef Limited Endowed Chair in Family Resiliency at the University of Illinois. And she also serves as the director of their Family Resiliency Center there. Dr. Feist is a leading figure in the field of family psychology. She's a fellow of the American Psychological Association and is vice president for education for APA's Division of Family Psychology. She serves on numerous editorial boards and currently serves as associate editor for the Journal of Family Psychology. She's a past associate editor of the Journal of Pediatric Psychology. As you might imagine, Dr. Feist has been a very productive researcher with over 100 publications, including 2 books and many journal articles and invited chapters. The focus of her research has been on the way in which family functioning impacts children's health. And I believe that she's going to talk to us about that today. The title of her talk is The ABCs of Family Mealtimes, Opportunities to Promote Health and Well-Being Through Evidence, Practice, and Policy. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Barbara Feist. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate the invitation here today. I just want to set the record straight. I'm still a Big East fan, and we can quibble later about where the rankings stand for next year. I'm not sure where I fit into the scheme of things here in terms of a former Villanova student, in terms of my trajectory. And maybe that's going to become clear, hopefully, through my talk. Although I do hold an academic position, and I have since I received my PhD, my career has not been one that you might call fairly traditional. And in fact, my time at Villanova was not one that was particularly traditional. I was fortunate to work with Dr. Blewett and learned a lot about language and the meaning of language, and that has been a thread throughout my work in terms of the importance of communication. So let's get started. And talking about why do I study family mealtimes? Well, it really is an expectable part of family life. I hope to convince you that it is connected to important health outcomes. It's sensitive to ethnic and economic contexts, which is very important as we try to unpack health disparities and the great economic costs to our country today. It's possible to translate this to interventions, and a particular interest that I have in my working life today is how this can be connected to public policy. But health is very complicated. It's not, as for those of you who are parents or for those of you who are raised by parents, it's not enough just to say, eat your vegetables, okay? It doesn't work that simply. So children's health and well-being is embedded within the practices that families carry on in their daily life. But the way in which families carry on their routines in their daily life is very much embedded in their socioeconomic context, the resources that they have available to them, which is also embedded in their culture. So the practices that we have in our daily life, the way in which we practice things like mealtime, bedtime, celebrations are very much influenced by the families that we grew up in and the cultural beliefs that we hold. So what I want to talk with you about this afternoon is why we study mealtimes in the first place, give you some examples of the health promoting aspects of family meal times, specifically how these practices can reduce anxiety and increase positive health outcomes for children with chronic health conditions, how it may also be a way to prevent unhealthy weight gain in early childhood and prevent childhood obesity. Talk about some of the common dilemmas and barriers to practicing healthy meal times, and end with some application to public policy. So let's start out with some facts, because people say, well, people don't eat together, so why are you studying this? Well, I'm here to tell you actually they do. Most shared family meal times, first of all, they last between 18 and 20 minutes. We are not talking about elaborate affairs with candelabras on the table, okay? I have seen these, but for most families, it's in and out 18 to 20 minutes. 63% of families in national surveys report that they eat dinner together frequently or always. Families with children under 18 eat dinner together frequently or always 77% of the time. And 86% of parents agree that dinner time was the best time for families to get together and talk. Okay? So these are powerful opportunities, other than riding in the van, okay, that families can get together and find out what's going on and to send powerful messages to their children. We recently conducted a meta-analysis of studies that have been published in the literature that included over 182,000 children. And what we found is that for families that eat together 3 or more times a week, it increases your odds by over 20% that you're likely to eat fruits and vegetables, okay? It increases your risk if you eat together fewer than 3 times a week for obesity by about 12%, for eating disorders by about 20%, and for eating unhealthy foods by about 32%. So this 18 to 20 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, has the potential to affect powerful health outcomes. But there are socioeconomic variations. So if we look at national data sets, we find that families that have less economic resources are less likely to practice regular bedtime and meal times, particularly when their children are young. But it's not a simple, there's not a simple linear equation, a simple linear effect. This was a study that was done in Chicago, but I can tell you that the same sort of pattern holds true even in Champaign-Urbana, that access to healthy foods is affected by both income and ethnicity. So for example, if you're an African American or a Latino living in a low-income neighborhood, you are much more likely to run into a McDonald's than you are into a grocery store that sells fruits and vegetables, okay? I want you to just sort of store this in the back of your mind in terms of when we start thinking about access to healthy foods, the social and cultural context of mealtimes, and I'll come back to this in a minute. All right, let's think just a little bit about the context of routines and health, and why mealtimes may be a good context to promote both healthy eating and emotional health. Family routines sustain family health through an element of planning. So if you're planning ahead, again, not elaborate planning, through planning ahead, through open and direct communication, so you know what's going on, a sense of order and predictability, and a belief that the challenges in your everyday life are manageable, okay? We all know that when your routines get disrupted, if you're highly stressed, think about things, you can't find your car keys, you can't remember what time your appointments are, but you find ways to get order back into your life. If your routines are chronically disrupted over time, then managing daily life becomes a stress and a burden. It's hard to stick to a calendar. It's hard to plan ahead. You become strained, your communications become strained, and life becomes overwhelming. And there are consequences to your health. So let's focus just on mealtime routines. What we've been trying to do is develop a model that gets beyond just the sheer frequency effect of mealtime. So what? If you eat meals together 3 or 4 times a week, that doesn't tell us the mechanism or the process by which mealtimes can have health-promoting benefits. And we wanted to really focus on ways in which we could look at this from a health disparities model. So how can we better understand the socioeconomic context of mealtimes and look at particular health challenges that might be susceptible to variations in daily routines. So we started out first by looking at children with a chronic health condition, and we chose asthma. And we've conducted 4 studies across 2 different sites in upstate New York and Denver, Colorado. We've studied over 400 families with children between 5 and 12 years of age. About half of them are non-Hispanic and white. About half of them have 2 or more adults in the household, and about a third of them, their moms have had a high school education or less. Okay, so why did we study asthma? I don't have asthma. Nobody in my family has asthma, so this was not a natural draw. The reason that we chose this is that it's one of the most persistent health problems for school-age children. It affects over 5 million kids in the United States. In a classroom of 30 kids, 3 kids are likely to have asthma in that classroom. It's the leading cause of school absenteeism. It costs a lot of money to take care of it, about $3.2 billion a year. And the comorbidities include anxiety, sleep disturbance, and obesity. Okay? And now I want to be very, very clear. I'm talking about persistent asthma. I'm not talking about exercise-induced asthma. So these are kids that have to take medicine at least twice a day. All right, so we went into families' homes. We set up video cameras. We weren't there, and we recorded their meal times. Okay? The families that we studied ranged in size from 2 to 12 members. I have seen it all, I'm telling you. I have seen families eating in front of the couch, watching television. I have seen families sitting around a table that is smaller than this, and there are 8 members there. I have seen families that have dogs running in and out. I have seen a mom talking on 2 cell phones at one time, feeding her children. Okay? We can talk more about that later if you'd like. And so for our first pass, we use what we call global coding schemes, where we sort of get a general sense about how they manage the meal, emotions, how they talk during the meal, and how they assign roles. And our model is that we felt that the symptoms, the physiological functioning of the children would be related to their anxiety. We know these kids are at risk for anxiety, but it would be mediated. That is, the effect would be through how they interacted during mealtime. And so first of all, we find that kids who have anxiety, have this separation anxiety, their lung function is worse, they wheeze more, they have shortness of breath, and they have this tightness in their lungs. But we also find that kids who have these heightened sense of anxiety, that their mealtime interactions are different. So they're kind of uneven. It's difficult to get the task done. Affect is responded to in a less positive way. There's less personal involvement, and roles are less smoothly assigned. But the model is that it's really the mealtime involvement that shows you that pathway between physiological lung functioning and the child's felt feeling of anxiety, rather than that direct line between lung functioning and anxiety. It's really the mealtime involvement that explains the effect. Okay, So just very, very briefly, we know that eating 3 or more times a week is associated with markers of health, such as reduced risk for obesity, eating disorders, and increased opportunities for eating healthy foods. And if we look at this sort of general view of how families interact during a meal, it may protect children from some of the associated risks of a chronic health condition. But we're still not really drilling down yet to know exactly what's going on during these mealtime interactions. And we haven't really unpacked some of the socioeconomic effects yet. So what we've done is we've gone back and we've created what we call the ABCs of family mealtimes. And this is work that I've done in collaboration with the American Psychological Association to think very simply and concretely about what families do during their meals. So they're involved in activities, okay, talking on the cell phone, watching television, being on the computer, but then they're also involved in certain behaviors like manners, paying attention to manners, controlling behavior. But the thing that is most healthy in a mealtime is when you communicate. Checking in on what happened with the kid during school, talking about whether you're going to get that new puppy or not, talking about the fight on the bus during school. So if you think about what makes a healthy mealtime, is that you should spend very little time in terms of action. In fact, what you should do is turn off that cell phone, turn off the television, a little bit of time spend on behavior control, good manners, and a lot of time in positive communication. So what we did is we went back and recoded 200 family meal times, second by second, and created what we call our phenotype of family meal times. No offense to the very talented neuroscientists in the audience. And so what we could do is we could see the proportion of time that is spent in these activities versus behavior control versus communication. And we wanted to apply this model now to look at whether it would predict risk for obesity and layer into that the socioeconomic context. And for those of you who don't follow this, we know that lower income women have an increased risk for obesity, going back to that access to healthy foods. Children of minority status have an increased risk for obesity. And if you've got the television on while you're eating, there's also an increased risk for obesity. And I'm going to come back and tell you a little bit more about why that may be the case. So this is just our national rates of obesity in the United States up through 2004. Some people say it's leveling off. It's not all that great. I want to call your attention to this. 2 to 5-year-olds right now, we're hovering at about 15% of the United States children under the age of 5 are considered obese. So what we find is the amount of time spent at the meal for the children in our sample. Those who had an unhealthy weight, they spent less time at the meal. They also had what we call more of this activity going on with lower education. Moms who had a high school education or less, they spent over half of the time in some kind of activity, talking on the phone, watching television, being up and down, and less time in positive communication if you were a single adult household. So what we're putting together now is that if you directly observe families during their mealtime, that these variations in interaction is associated with, it's not causing it, it's associated with physiological functioning as we tap into lung functioning. It's associated with mental health. It's associated with obesity and other markers of health. And the health promoting features that we see are things like planning ahead, having a sense of control of what's going on, having genuine communication. Again, the communication takes up about 12 minutes. We're not talking long, drawn out, drilling your kids about everything that's going on. And less hubbub, less activity, okay? Less stuff going on in that 15 to 18 minutes. And that there are significant variations by socio-demographic characteristics. So what we've decided to do now is apply this knowledge to different interventions. We think it's very important to tailor these approaches because for those of you that practice your daily routines, a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. If you send your kids over to their neighbor's house for dinner, they're going to come home and say, do you know what they get away with at your next door neighbor's house? It's not the same, okay? So you have to take into account what your own practices are like and try to reinforce those. We've developed some primary care-based approaches to asthma management. I'm not going to talk about those. I'm going to talk about our community-based approaches to obesity prevention. Abriendo caminos is Spanish for clearing the path. And this is a tailored approach to preventing childhood obesity in Spanish-speaking families who have recently immigrated to the United States. In Champaign-Urbana, we've had a 250% increase in Spanish-speaking families, primarily due to the large agricultural community. Our objectives are to provide nutrition education, promote shared family meal times, and then incorporate physical activity, primarily through folk dancing and physical activity that parents used to do when they were in Mexico. So a sample session is we use a phenomenon called más o menos. So eat a little bit more of healthy grains and a little bit less of unhealthy grains like white bread. Our physical activity is we do a lot of salsa dancing. We also use a lot of hula hoops, which the kids love. But we have the parents and the children together. We have everybody, we have babies, and we had grandmas. Although the target is 5 to 12-year-old kids. And then we focus on the mealtime ABCs to take action to turn off the television and the cell phone, to focus on communication. We use storytelling cards. We focus very much on the importance of storytelling in Spanish-speaking families, and then working on planning ahead, setting good expectations for behavior, and then thinking before you act, particularly with sibling conflict. So, if all this stuff is so good for you, how come people don't do it? I tried to convince you in the beginning that they do, but there are a lot of obstacles to a healthy mealtime that's enjoyable. So we find that actually people spend a lot of time in front of the television eating and not necessarily eating together. And eating in front of the television is not a particularly healthy way to eat. In a recent report by the Centers for Disease Control, 46% of the families said that they had a television in the area where they ate. Parents of young children say that they turn on the television during meals to avoid having conflict at the table. Correlational studies tell us that eating in front of the television reduces consumption of fruits and vegetables. And each hour of additional television viewing increases the prevalence of childhood obesity by 2%. This is not a healthy environment. If you look at television of children's programming and what is actually put on children's programming in terms of food advertising, I don't know if you're familiar with slow-go and low foods. A slow food is something like cake and donuts and highly sweetened foods that you should only eat like on your birthday. A go food is like fruits and vegetables. Okay, most advertising directed towards children is in the slow food. Go foods account for less than 1% of all food advertising to children. You would have to watch 10 hours of television to see one ad that had to do with Go Food. Now, children already watch way too much television, but if you want to put them down in front of a television for 10 hours, I think the counterbalance effect is probably going to be detrimental. So, we ask parents, what are the barriers to having a healthy meal together? And by healthy, I mean healthy mentally, so you're not stressed out. And what they told us is that, well, siblings are fighting with each other, kids are picky about the kind of food they eat, and little kids are having tantrums. And so it's just not really that much fun. Also, scheduling difficulties, having to work too much, and not getting enough support from their partner. We can talk more about that later, too. For families with 8 to 10-year-olds, you see the same thing. Having to plan ahead, scrambling for meals, picky eaters, conflict, and their partner not being there. So let's try to put this in perspective. So I told you that a meal lasts between 18 and 20 minutes, and people say we just don't have time to do this. But if you put it in the context of how you use time in your day, you're spending 12% of your time in front of television or a computer or your iPhone. If you took just 20 to 30 minutes of that time, it's still less than 1% of the time in your day. And the potential for the health promoting benefits are huge. If you cut out one television show, one 30-minute television show, you have the opportunity to spend that time with your kids. So we have to give families real solutions to the barriers that they're experiencing. So we have developed public service announcements with support from the Pampered Chef Company.
Whoever said easy as pie obviously didn't have my 3 over for dinner. Making dinner wasn't so much the problem. Making it through dinner was. I felt like I needed super nanny, but what I needed was a plan. Turns out a meal plan is more than just a menu and a grocery list. Still, our plan is pretty simple. We give a 20-minute warning before dinner so the kids can wrap up their playtime. Then, about 10 minutes beforehand, we give each person a task, like helping to set the table. And we all practice stop, think, and then talk when we disagree or get stressed out. A real meal plan isn't perfect, but it's made all the difference. Family dinner. Kids eat it up.
So our intent with these public service announcements is that we have taken evidence based on how to manage sibling conflict, the importance of planning ahead in family meal times, and the importance of positive communications. This is the first one we've developed. We have a sibling conflict one. We have a temper tantrum one. We're hoping next year to develop one on picky eating and work-life stress. So we now are branching out in terms of thinking about taking some of these evidence-based approaches in terms of community and application to policy, in terms of what we can do to promote healthy eating and active living based on strong principles of evidence, but that it's easy for people to use. We are working closely with child care providers and employers to make use of the federally subsidized food programs. So the federal government spends a lot of money on supporting food subsidy. You've heard a lot about school lunch programs, probably. They also spend a lot of money on the child care and adult food program, which is subsidized food for child care programs. So we are now working statewide and soon to be nationwide with childcare centers to promote shared feeding practices that has been shown to reduce the risk for obesity, as well as making alternative choices for young children. So you can actually eat an apple rather than drink apple juice, eat whole grains rather than eat white bread, and not serve as many corn dogs to young children, which is actually subsidized by the CACFP program. And then at the federal level, we're not doing quite as much work in this area, but there are other people who are working in terms of targeted food advertising to young children. We have formed a coalition, a community university coalition called CU Fit Families in our area. We now have over 60 nonprofit organizations, as well as the Public Health Department, the Parks Department, about 20 different academic units on campus. And we provide education and public events in our community. This is a picture of Sprouts at the Market, where we went to our local farmers market. We have an undergraduate course called Food and Family, where we have engaged people from 11 different disciplines across our campus to focus on how to connect food and family in positive ways. At this one, we had an Eat a Rainbow event where we targeted child care centers in our community, and the children came to the event on a Saturday morning, and they had to go around to the different vendors and eat a rainbow of colored fruits. And this is one of our students who's actually an economics major, interested in studying subsidized food programs. We support Safe Routes to School and the Walking School Bus, which is to get volunteers to promote children walking to school, even though it's not always safe in some neighborhoods. And we're actually a national center for the Safe Routes to School program. We also work with our food banks and Feeding America to work on weekend feeding programs, and we are the first place to do an evaluation of the backpack program, which some of you might have heard of, which is a weekend feeding program to reduce food insecurity and child hunger, administered through local schools. This program is highly popular, but it has not been evaluated for its effectiveness. And we are working to look at the effectiveness of this program in terms of promoting school attendance, improving children's health, and promoting a better family climate at home. If you would like to learn more about some of our work, I've written a social policy report for the Society for Research and Child Development on reclaiming the family table. It outlines many of the things I've talked about here today and some of the actions that you can take on a local level. This is my home, my academic home. It's the Family Resiliency Center. It was endowed by Doris Kelly Christopher, who's the founder of the Pampered Chef Company. You can see right over here, this is our research home where that public service announcement was filmed. It has a fully functioning kitchen in it. We're able to do video recordings of family meal times in there, as well as focus groups. We're just about ready to launch our first experimental study of family meal times and psychophysiological reactivity. So I go back to my roots at Villanova. I'm finally going to do experimental work. This is members of our family mealtime work. Much of my work is now supported by the Food and Family Program, which is the Christopher Family Foundation, and we seek to find ways to connect food and family in positive ways through evidence-based programming. So, thank you very much.
We have time for questions.
Yes.
What age should children be for families to start eating together, or is there like a certain age that where it's okay for families to stop eating together?
That's a really good question. Usually, somewhere between about 18 months and 2 years of age, toddlers can stand to eat for about 10 minutes. That's about all you can handle, and it's about all parents can usually handle. But it's good to start those practices young, around 2 to 3 years of age, because then they can be picking up food, and they don't have to be, it's not so much the focus on just feeding, so around toddlers. I get the question a lot about adolescents eating with their families, because you get a lot of, and you can probably, many people here can relate to this. You get a lot of eye rolling, like, oh God, I have to go eat with my parents, really. And so, actually, in national surveys, what you find is that many adolescents want to spend more time with their parents. The conflict or the challenge typically is after school activities, work, that gets in the way. So one of the things that you can do is find one night a week that everybody that they commit to being together, whether it's on the weekend or it's one night during the week where you don't have those scheduling conflicts. And what you find is that actually teens get a lot of benefit from that. Parents enjoy it too, but it's that forced scheduling that sometimes then builds up that resentment, that it becomes an obligation rather than something that you look forward to. Yes?
I actually have 2 questions.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering about go slow and go slow.
Yeah.
So I know that you said that you have to watch 10 hours of TV to see one ad or a movie. But I guess I don't really watch very much TV.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm often seeing commercials for like granola bars for kids.
Yeah.
Or like yogurt. And stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I don't really know
Yogurt.
which category that falls into.
You have to be really careful and read the labels.
Yeah.
Because even some of those foods have a lot of sugar in them. Okay, so they may be low fat, but they have a lot of sugar in them. So that's a whoa.
Okay.
That's a whoa. Yeah.
Okay, and then my other question is a little more complicated. I guess, what would you advise to someone who is planning on having a family but also being a working professional?
Yeah.
And both parents being in that situation,
Yeah.
especially because growing up, both my parents worked. My mom's a doctor.
Yeah.
Well, she still is. Whatever.
Yeah.
So she never really had time to make us dinner, and she
Yeah.
often had to sleep in the hospital and wasn't
Right.
home.
Yeah.
And so we never really ate together.
Yeah.
And either only one parent was home or neither parent
Yeah.
was home. So I'm just, I don't know, I'm just wondering what is the best way to deal with that.
Well, there's probably no single answer, but I hear this a lot, and we've talked to a lot of young moms, and I say moms, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but we seem to get more questions from moms than we do from dads. I think this goes back to the barrier that gets identified as getting help from your partner and learning how to ask to get help from your partner. Some of the solutions that some of the creative solutions that I'm hearing about are people forming like cooking clubs, one day a week, like on the weekend, and then cooking for the week together so that you actually have food available, because it is difficult to come home and throw something together, particularly if you haven't been exposed to it before. So there are a lot of people who have not been exposed to cooking. And so it feels uncomfortable, it feels like it's a lot of work. And so if you can learn to cook with other people and then cook for an entire week, then you have, I know somebody that cooks for an entire month. That's a lot of planning. But those are some of the ways. Learn how to ask your partner for help and take turns. And then the other thing is not to have such high expectations, like, oh God, we have to eat together. Like now I gotta eat together 6 times a week. No, be real, but look for those opportunities. Yeah.
I guess a follow-up to that question is, do you have any data on whether having 2 parents versus having 1 parent at the meal time makes a substantial difference? I mean, because it seems that a lot of what you are pointing at, if I understood correctly, is the conversation part. And of course, having 2 parents would probably increase the amount of conversation there is. But do you have you looked at the data of whether 1 parent versus 2 parents makes a difference?
That's a complicated question, because for one thing, it could be confounded by education and socioeconomic status. So much of the data that we have, if you look at a single parent family, oftentimes those are families that have a lower education level and a lower economic status. But that doesn't, and so there's a lot of issues that can affect the quality of the meal that are economic pressures. But having 1 or more adults at the table is a different question, because the quality of the conversation could actually be just as good if it's 1 person versus having 2 people. There was a study done, it was about 15 years ago, that actually looked at the amount of time spent having 1 parent versus 2 parents. And if you had 1 parent at the table, actually there was more time spent directed to the child if you had 1 parent than if you had 2. So, I think it's hard to untangle the way that we've set up the studies, that so many times it's confounded with these socioeconomic features. So you'd have to do a good controlled experiment, right? You have 1 parent, and you have 2.
You have a nice building.
Yeah. And you have a nice building, and you have people that give you the money to go
I
do
gotta
it.
go home to have dinner with the kids. So.
Yes, right. That's right. That's right. Yes, back there.
Have you or anyone else looked into a correlation between academic achievement and mealtime time?
Jean Brody has done some interesting work with some high-risk African American families in the South, and he hasn't looked at meal times per se. He's looked primarily at family routines, and found that for boys there's a protective effect. So the more routines that the families practice, particularly in single-parent families, then the boys do better in terms of academic achievement. We haven't looked too much at academic achievement. Yes.
With regard to picky eating,
Mm-hmm.
recently there was a report that picky eating will be added to the DSM-5 as a psychological disorder. And I was wondering what your opinion was on that.
Picky eating is getting a lot of attention these days, and I work with some really wonderful nutrition scientists who taught me a lot about picky eating. Having what they call food jags is very normal, particularly for like preschool age kids. And so, sometimes kids will only eat white food. And then the next week, I'm only going to eat mushy food. And then the next week, I'm only going to eat food that has sharp points on it. I mean, I remember my son, for a while, he only had 3 basic food groups. It was yogurt, rice-a-roni, and hot dogs. Not the healthiest of all foods, but hey, he's fine. He grew up. So, I think that we have seen some families that have come to us that have sort of extremes that, on a very, very extreme end, but there's usually something else that's going on other than just that. But it's very, very normal for kids to like, I'm going to try this week and that next week. And so we've been working with child care providers around this issue and trying to get them to say, well, just introduce one different food a week. Don't introduce 6 different foods in 1 week. Introduce one different food and just try to get them to try it. But don't force it. That's the worst thing you could ever do. Yes?
I know you had mentioned that families who watch television over dinner typically eat less fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Do you think, I was wondering what you found that reason was, or if that had anything to do with advertising constantly being focused around, on fruits and vegetable food products?
Brian Wansink at Cornell has done some interesting work on this, and part of it has to do with what's advertised during regular mealtime hours, and you just might want to pay attention to that. It's like, oh, I didn't know I wanted a Big Mac right now. Yeah, those French fries look really good. I didn't know I wanted that. So what happens is that you get cued, and then you want to go out and eat. I worked for I had a fellowship with an advertising company one summer, and I was on the KFC and the Lunchables accounts, and it was very, very interesting. These are brilliant people. Really, yeah, I mean, really, no, really, they're very, very creative, really, really brilliant people, but they know how to get under your skin. And so the theory is that you're exposed to that food advertising during the meal that makes you want to go out and get that food. And so it's sort of like a vicious cycle of like, I'm going to go get that Big Mac because now I really want it. Yes.
This touches back to what you were saying about adolescence, or as your kids get older, and the availability of time to have them eat together. One of the things I was wondering, have you ever thought of establishing, like with schools or other kind of community-based programs, an hour for dinner? Like, so no school activities? Because I think one of the biggest constraints is you have to get to soccer, this one has lacrosse, this one.
Yeah.
So finding that 20 minutes
Yeah.
is after bedtime, is that 20
Yeah.
minutes of that, pie that you said is available.
Right.
So if it were the case that there was, even if it was a little earlier for some people, 5:30 to 6:30, where nobody can schedule lacrosse, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 then I think you might have families who say, even find it difficult, working parents who find it difficult to say, I'll get home from 5:30 to 6:30, and then 6:30 I'll go back, or I'll do my work after that period.
Yeah.
Is there any
Bill Doherty's tried this. Bill Doherty's at University of Minnesota, and he's tried to work with entire communities around that. And there's been some success. You also get a lot of pushback. Get a lot of pushback. Oh, I'm sorry.
What if you live in a household with like a lot of conflict? Like, would establishing a family mealtime have the same beneficial?
That is a beautiful question.
Would you repeat it?
Yeah. The question is, what if you live in a household with a lot of conflict? Would you go out and establish family meal times? No. Okay, and now I'll tell you why. So what I mentioned, I said I've seen a lot on these meal times, and so one of the ones we saw was a woman that. This girl was trying so hard to have a normal mealtime. She's asking her, should we say grace? And the mom said, I don't believe in that stuff. And then the girl said, she tried to work with the mom about, I'm going to go, it's a fundraising event for school. Who can I go ask to buy, to sell, I don't know, candy, something, whatever it was. And she says, I think I'm going to go ask my cousin. She just got some money from my aunt. And she goes, why'd she get money from your aunt? It was just a very, very harsh interaction. At one point, the mom, and Judge Judy's on in the background, by the way. And she's spending more time watching Judge Judy. There are 3 televisions on at all time in this household. There are 2 people that live there. And at one point, the mom gets up, she picks up a knife that she's cut the sandwiches with, and she flings it across the kitchen into the sink, and the girl's sitting right there. Okay? I don't think that was a healthy interaction. I am a clinical psychologist, but so I think in families where there potentially there's been a lot of trauma, where there's been a lot of conflict, where there hasn't been a lot of experience in the past of close personal interactions, I don't think mealtime is the place you start to have good regular routines. I would actually start with ones that have less time involved. I would start with young kids' bedtime routines, because I think that meal times are so powerful, they're so emotionally charged. If there's a lot of conflict in the family and you don't have the tools to manage that negative conflict, they have the potential to explode. So I think I'm glad you brought that up. Yes.
Going off that last story you gave,
Uh-huh.
how do we know that communication is truly the beneficial thing that makes them better, that they feel better about it? And it's not the fact that the parents who spend the time to communicate with their children are also investing in their children, and they also care more about what they want their children to eat. Could it also be that the parents who don't mind letting their kids watch TV also don't mind if they eat Lunchables and all that crap?
That's true. That's true. It's a very good question. For those who didn't hear it, how do we know that this is like the key ingredient, right? I don't know that. Okay. I mean, I can do some fancy statistical modeling. Okay, and I've done that. Take out general family functioning, and this still has an effect. Okay, that's not a very satisfactory answer from my point. I don't know really that this is like the litmus. I don't know that this is the essential ingredient. What I do know is that this is something that makes sense to families. It's something that they can do, and it's something that they're able to craft in their own unique way that's meaningful for them. So it's easier in some ways to get them to incorporate this into their daily life than it is for me to say, you need to eat 4 fruits and vegetables a day. So it provides a context to then do other things like promoting healthy communication, healthy eating, resolving conflict, teaching good sibling management techniques. Yes?
Yes, 3 major food groups I'm considering giving up. Cigarettes, scotch, and steak.
Uh-huh.
Which would you recommend dropping?
Wow. Gee, as somebody who works with public health, I'd say cigarettes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Sure.